He ordered a mail-order bride as a joke, but identical Chinese twins stepped off the train. The high desert sun beat down on Redemption Gulch without mercy. Heat shimmered off the iron tracks, warping the air around the lonely platform where Reese Morgan stood. At 35, the land had already carved deep lines into his face, and his broad shoulders slumped with a weariness that went bone deep. His shirt was a second skin of sweat, his hat a faded relic of better days. His gaze was fixed down the line, waiting for the train that carried his last desperate hope. The wind tasted of dust and despair. He remembered when Stone Creek, his family's ranch, had been a carpet of green, fed by a creek that ran strong and clear. That was before his father passed, before the drought, and before Marcus Thorne began squeezing the life out of the valley. Thorne owned the bank, the saloon, and the loyalty of men like Sheriff Corbin. Now, Reese's debts grew like tumbleweeds, and the creek was little more than a dry, cracked scar on the earth. His only remaining gamble was a mail-order bride. The advertisement had cost him dearly. Hard-working rancher, 35, seeks capable woman of good morals for partnership in life and land. A steady hand and honest heart offered in return. Only one reply had come, written in a delicate, precise script. A woman named Leanne, who promised to come and build a new life with him. Today was the day. Reese shifted his weight, acutely aware of the eyes on his back. From the porch of the general store, whispers flew from behind fans. Across the street, Sheriff Corbin leaned against a support beam, a cruel, lazy smirk playing on his lips. He was Thorne's shadow, and just as cold. "Expecting company, Morgan." Corbin's voice was a low drawl, thick with ridicule. Reese ignored him, his attention caught by a distant plume of smoke. The whistle of the noon train from Sacramento sliced through the oppressive silence, a hawk's cry signaling its arrival. The ground trembled as the black locomotive roared into the station, a dragon of steam and steel. Reese straightened his shoulders, pulling his hat from his head and trying to smooth his sweat-dampened hair. He wanted to look like a man worth betting on. The train hissed to a halt. A few dusty travelers disembarked, a salesman in a tight suit, a family with exhaustion etched onto their faces. Reese scanned the passengers, his heart sinking with each passing moment. He was looking for a solitary woman, perhaps with a nervous smile and a worn traveling bag. No one matched the image in his mind. All ashore for Redemption Gulch, the conductor bellowed. Disappointment settled in Reese's gut like a cold stone. She hadn't come. He had wagered his last hope on a ghost, and the entire town was here to witness his failure. He turned to leave, the laughter of Corbin and his cronies already starting to prickle his ears. Then, two figures appeared in the doorway of the last car. They were identical, two young women framed by the carriage's shadow. For a long moment, they stood perfectly still, taking in the scene. Then, they descended the steps together. A hush fell over the platform. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. They were Chinese, both around 25, with faces of porcelain and hair as black and gleaming as polished jet. They wore simple but well-made traveling dresses of dark blue cotton, their movements synchronized and graceful. They were utterly out of place in the grit and dust of Redemption Gulch, and they drew every eye. Their presence was a quiet fire, impossible to ignore. They moved toward him, their steps measured, their expressions calm and unreadable. One of the women, her gaze direct and sharp, stopped just before him. The other stood a pace behind, her eye sweeping over the town, missing nothing. "Mr. Reese Morgan," the first woman asked. Her voice was clear and steady, laced with an accent that was foreign yet precise. Reese could only nod, his tongue suddenly thick. Sheriff Corbin let out a loud, ugly laugh. "Well, I'll be. Looks like Morgan ordered double from the catalog. Or maybe he just can't read the fine print." A wave of snickers rippled through the onlookers. Reese felt a hot flush of anger rise up his neck. He turned on Corbin, his voice a low growl. "That's enough, Sheriff. These ladies are my guests." He turned back to the women, his face burning with shame for his town's welcome. He said, tipping his head respectfully. "Welcome to Redemption Gulch." The woman who had spoken gave a single, sharp nod of acknowledgement. "I am my." This is my sister, Lin. She held out a sealed letter. We have come in place of our sister, Lian. The news barely registered. Reese was still reeling from their appearance. He took the letter, his calloused fingers fumbling with the wax seal. As he read, Mai spoke again, her voice pitched for him alone. Our sister was to be your bride. She fell ill on the journey and passed in Sacramento. It was her dying wish that we honor her promise to you. We have come to fulfill her contract. Reese looked from the letter to the two women standing before him. He had sent for one bride to help save his ranch, and instead, fate had sent him two sisters with a story of tragedy. He didn't know what to do, what to say. He had expected a wife. What he got was a complication he couldn't begin to fathom. The wagon ride to Stone Creek was shrouded in a heavy silence, broken only by the creak of the wheels and the plodding of the mules. Reese kept his eyes on the dusty trail ahead, while Mai and Lin sat perfectly straight on the bench beside him. They didn't speak, but he could feel their eyes on the parched landscape, studying it, measuring it. Finally, as they passed a high ridge that shimmered in the afternoon heat, Mai spoke. That land, she said, her voice even. Who does it belong to? Marcus Thorne, Reese answered, the name tasting like ash in his mouth. Owns pretty much everything you can see. Including the man back at the station, Sheriff Corbin. Mai nodded slowly, her gaze shifting to the dry creek bed that snaked alongside the road. The creek, she said. Has it always been this way? Reese hesitated. Used to run full all year. It went dry about 2 years back. Right after Thorne bought up all the land upstream. Convenient, Lin murmured, her first word since leaving the station. Her voice was softer than her sister's, yet held a note of steel. Reese glanced at her. She was watching the cracked earth with an intensity that made him uneasy. He turned back to Mai, clearing his throat. Mai. I think there's been a misunderstanding. The agency. There is no misunderstanding, Mr. Morgan, Mai interrupted coolly. We are here to honor an agreement. You require help. We can provide it. But I was expecting. A wife, Reese stammered, feeling a fresh wave of heat crawl up his neck. I'm a rancher with nothing but debt and dust to my name. This is no life for ladies like you. This town, Thorne. It isn't a kind place. We are not looking for a kind place, Mr. Morgan, Mai stated firmly. We are looking for a safe one. And we are not delicate flowers. My sister, Lin, is skilled with water and mechanics. I am skilled with numbers and strategy. We can help you save this ranch. The partnership you offered our sister, Lin added, turning her sharp gaze on him. We are here to claim it. Not as brides, but as partners. Reese stared at them, dumbfounded. He had sent for a companion to ease his loneliness and a helper to share his burdens. He had received 2 business partners who spoke of contracts and strategy. They weren't here for marriage, they were here for the ranch itself. The reason why was a mystery, but as he looked at their determined faces, he knew he had no choice. He was out of options, and they were the only ones he had left. The Baque Ranch was a portrait of decay. The fences sagged, the corral stood empty, and the barn listed to one side like a tired old man. The house his father had built with his own 2 hands was faded and weather-beaten, a monument to his own failures. Seeing it through the eyes of these 2 strangers filled Reese with a profound sense of shame. When the wagon creaked to a halt, Mai and Lin climbed down before he could offer a hand. They surveyed the dilapidated homestead not with pity, but with a critical, appraising eye. The foundation is stone, Lin observed quietly, running a hand along the base of the house. That is good. Good for what? Reese asked, confused. Mai answered, her gaze sweeping over the surrounding terrain. For holding your ground. Mr. Morgan, you told us Mr. Thorne owns the land upstream. That means he controls your water. And the man who controls the water controls everything else. We have met men like him before. They do not stop until they are stopped. Reese shook his head, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. This isn't a war, It's just a string of bad luck. Men like Thorn manufacture bad luck for others, Mai replied, her expression unyielding. Now, where shall we sleep? Practicality must come first. He showed them inside. The air was stale with the smell of old wood and regret. He offered them the main bedroom, his parents' old room, and prepared to take the small cot in his cluttered office. As they settled in, Reese was left with 100 unspoken questions. Who were these women, really? And what trouble had they left behind that made a dying ranch in the middle of nowhere look like a safe harbor? The next morning, Reese awoke to the smell of coffee. He found Mai in the kitchen, a ledger book, his ledger book, open on the table. Lin was already outside, walking the perimeter of the property with a strange focus. I found your account books, Mai said without preamble, tapping a page with her finger. Mr. Thorne's bank has been charging you compound interest, recalculated weekly. It is illegal. It is theft. Reese just stared at her. It's his bank. His rules. That is what men say when they have already accepted defeat, she said flatly, pushing a cup of coffee toward him. Today, we walk the property line. We need to know exactly where your land ends and his begins. Knowledge is the first step to taking back what is yours. He didn't argue. He spent the day walking his own land with Lin, who moved with a purpose he couldn't understand. She didn't look at the dying fields, she studied the contour of the land, the flow of the dry gullies, the placement of every rock and withered tree. At the edge of the property, where his land met the dry creek bed, she knelt and scooped up a handful of dirt. There are traces of lime and coarse silt here, she murmured, more to herself than to him. This is not a natural drought. The water has been dammed. Before Reese could process what she'd said, the crack of a rifle echoed from the ridge above them. He instinctively pushed Lin behind him, grabbing for the old Winchester slung over his shoulder. That wasn't a warning, Mai called out, appearing from a cluster of rocks nearby. She held a small, finely crafted revolver in her hand, its silver finish gleaming in the sun. Reese hadn't even seen her approach. It's just one of Thorne's men trying to scare us off, Reese said, his heart pounding. They will have to try harder, Lin said, her eyes fixed on the ridge. That evening, the three of them sat around the kitchen table. Mai laid out her plan. It was audacious, dangerous, and brilliant. She spoke of legal challenges, of finding evidence, of turning Thorne's own tactics against him. Lin pointed out weaknesses in the ranch's defenses and sketched out plans for irrigation ditches that could capture what little rainwater they might get. This is all well and good, Reese said, overwhelmed. But Thorne has the whole town in his pocket. We have no 1 inch. Mai looked at him, her dark eye seeming to pierce right through him. We have each other. And we have the truth. He has built his empire on lies and fear. A foundation like that is more fragile than it appears. She then confessed the rest of their story. A powerful man in San Francisco, a business associate of Thorne's, had wanted to force Mai into marriage. When she refused, he had threatened their family. They had fled, using their sister's arrangement as a desperate escape, only to find themselves trading one enemy for another. Reese looked at the two women who had turned his life upside down. He had wanted a wife to share his burdens. Instead, he'd gotten allies for a war he hadn't known he was fighting. As he listened to them speak, a flicker of something he hadn't felt in years ignited within him, hope. It was a dangerous, fragile thing, but for the first time since his father's death, he felt he might not be alone in the fight for Stone Creek. The following weeks transformed the ranch. Under Lin's direction, they dug trenches, reinforcing the old well and creating a small reservoir lined with clay. She was a natural engineer, seeing solutions where Reese only saw problems. Mai, meanwhile, took over the finances. She bartered their last few healthy chickens for seed and tools in a neighboring town, avoiding Redemption Gulch entirely. She wrote letters to territorial marshals, to land surveyors, to newspapers in Sacramento, all detailing the suspicious nature of Thorne's acquisitions and the illegal interest rates of his bank. Reese worked alongside them, his initial bewilderment giving way to a grudging admiration that quickly blossomed into deep respect. He taught them how to mend fences and handle the mules. They taught him how to hope again. The silence between them was no longer heavy with uncertainty, but filled with the comfortable rhythm of shared work and a common purpose. Their progress did not go unnoticed. Marcus Thorne saw the quiet industry at Stone Creek as a direct challenge to his authority. One morning, Reese found his best mule with a lame leg. A week later, the wire on their northern fence was cut, though their few cattle hadn't wandered. They were warnings. The true escalation came when Reese and Lynn made their discovery. Following the dry creek bed far upstream onto Thorne's property, they found it, a cleverly disguised dam, built with rock and timber, diverting the entirety of Stone Creek's flow into a private reservoir for Thorne's own herds. It was illegal, a blatant act of theft that was starving the entire lower valley. "This is the proof," Lynn said, her voice trembling with a quiet fury. "This is how we stop him." They documented everything, taking sketches and samples of the construction. But Thorne was a step ahead. As they made their way back to the ranch, Sheriff Corbin and two of Thorne's hired guns were waiting for them. "Trespassing, Morgan," Corbin sneered, his hand resting on his pistol. "And consorting with these two. Thorne wants his property back. He's calling in your debt. You have until noon tomorrow to clear out." "You can't," Reese shot back. "That dam is illegal. We have proof." Corbin just laughed. "Proof is whatever Mr. Thorne says it is. Noon tomorrow." That night, the mood at the ranch was grim. They were out of time. Mai's letters likely hadn't even reached their destinations yet. "He won't just take the ranch," Mai said, her face pale in the lamplight. "He will make sure we are silenced for good." Lynn, who had been quiet all evening, finally spoke. "Then he will have to come and silence us." She unrolled a sketch on the table. It was a map of the ranch, but marked with new symbols and lines. "He thinks this is a broken-down farm. We will make it a fortress." Dawn broke, painting the sky in shades of gray and rose. They worked with a feverish intensity, using Lynn's plans as their guide. They rigged tripwires connected to old buckets filled with rocks in the gullies. They boarded up windows, leaving small slits for rifles. They moved the wagon to create a barricade near the barn. As the sun climbed toward its zenith, they saw the dust cloud on the horizon. Thorne, Corbin, and a half-dozen of his men were riding toward them. "They're here," Reese said, his mouth dry. He looked at Mai and Lynn, who stood beside him, rifles in hand. Their faces were tense but resolute. They were not brides, not helpless women. They were warriors. The first shot came from Thorne's men, splintering the wood of the porch railing. Reese returned fire, the sound of his Winchester echoing across the silent land. The fight for Stone Creek had begun. Thorne's men tried to charge the house, but they ran straight into Lynn's traps. Cries of pain and surprise erupted as men were felled by swinging logs or tangled in cleverly hidden snares. From the house, Reese, Mai, and Lynn laid down covering fire. They fought with a desperate, coordinated grace. Mai called out enemy positions, her mind a step ahead of their attackers. Lynn's shots were unnervingly accurate, and Reese fought with the ferocity of a man defending his last piece of the world. The siege lasted for what felt like an eternity. The air grew thick with gunpowder and fear. Corbin managed to get close to the barn, a lit torch in his hand, but Reese spotted him. A well-aimed shot sent the torch flying harmlessly into the dirt. Enraged, Corbin charged the house directly. The front door splintered under his weight, but as he stumbled inside, Mai was there to meet him, her small revolver bucking in her hand. The sheriff crumpled to the floor. Seeing his man fall, Thorne's confidence wavered. He had expected a quick and brutal eviction, not an organized, strategic defense. His remaining men were losing their nerve. It was then that another sound cut through the chaos, the thunder of approaching horses. A posse of riders appeared over the ridge, led by a tall man with a U.S. Marshal star gleaming on his chest. Marcus Thorne, the marshal's voice boomed across the battlefield. "You're under arrest for illegal water diversion, fraud, and attempted murder." Thorne's face went white. He stared in disbelief, first at the marshal, then back at the house, where Mai stood in the doorway. She gave him a small, cold smile. One of her letters had arrived after all. Trapped between the marshal's posse and the unyielding defense of the ranch, Thorne's remaining men threw down their weapons. Thorne himself made a desperate break for it, but Reese, vaulting over the porch railing, tackled him to the ground. The fight was over. A week later, the creek at Stone Creek was running again. With the dam dismantled and Thorne and Corbin in federal custody, the valley felt like it could breathe for the first time in years. The townspeople, who had once mocked Reese, now greeted him with a newfound respect. The train waited at the platform, hissing steam into the morning air. Mai and Lin stood beside Reese, their bags at their feet. The marshal had offered them safe passage anywhere they wished to go. "You could leave," Reese said quietly, unable to look them in the eye. "Go somewhere safe. Start fresh." Mai looked out at the land, a faint smile on her lips. "This place is safe now, because we made it so. Why would we leave?" "Our work here isn't finished," Lin added, her gaze meeting Reese's. "The ranch is alive, but it is not yet strong. A partnership is not so easily dissolved." Reese felt a smile spread across his face, genuine and deep. He looked at the two women who had arrived as strangers and had become his family. He had sent for a bride to help him save his ranch. What he got was so much more. He got partners. He got fighters. He got a future he never could have imagined. Together, the three of them turned from the waiting train and headed back to the wagon. They had a ranch to rebuild. Their work had just begun.